again. It is Wednesday night, and I'm not going to be on long tonight. I got three quick, simple things for you tonight. Hopefully, there are things that you can apply in your Christian walk. And let's just get right into it. I hope you guys had a great week. I will be coming on from now on every Wednesday night at 8:30. So invite somebody or tell somebody to watch. All right. I try to make it very simple and very applicable things that we can definitely apply to our life. You can leave tonight when you get out and have something that you've grown in your relationship with God, or something that you can apply to your life on tomorrow. All right. And so with that, guys, we are going to Second Kings. This month we are in the book of Second Kings. We're going to Second Kings chapter 8, verse 1 through 6. For those of you who did tune on last week, we were talking about the woman from Shunem. And tonight we're going to still be talking about the woman from Shunem, but we a few chapters later, okay? So Second Kings chapter 8. I'm going to begin at verse number 1. I'm reading from the New Living Translation version because I want you to read it. I want you to hear it like a story. It says, Elijah had told the woman whose son she had brought back to life, take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called a famine on Israel that will last for 7 years. So the woman did as the man of God instructed. She took her family and lived in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. After the famine ended, she returned to the land of Israel, and she went to see the king about getting back her house and land. As she came in, the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of Elijah. The king had just said, tell me some stories about the great things Elijah has done. And Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elijah had brought back a boy to life. At that very moment, the mother of the boy walked in to make her appeal to the king. Look, my lord, Gehazi exclaimed, here is the woman now that I was just speaking of, and this is her son, the very one Elisha brought back to life. And I'm going to stop at verse 6. Is this true? The king asked her, and she told him that it was. So he directed one of his officials to see to it that everything she had lost was restored to her, including the value of any crops that had been harvested on her land during her absence. All right. And so tonight, First Kings chapter 8, verse 1 through 6 is definitely talking about the woman of Shunem. Just to give you some backdrop, in the book of Kings, this woman from last week, this woman was just a kind-hearted woman who just decided to be a blessing to the prophet Elisha. She saw him traveling to and up and down the road, and she just decided that she was going to be a blessing to him. So she built him a room on the side of her house. She gave him a bed. She gave him a table with a lamp. And so from that, as the story goes, Elijah started being, he gave her a son. In other words, he prophesied that she would have a son. And so that was in lesson 1. So those of you who didn't see that, go back and check that out. It is on my page because I don't want to go too far into that. But this same woman, now we find in four chapters later that Elijah gives her insight about some of the things that are going to happen in the future. And so let me back up a minute and just get us to understand that what Kings does in the book of Second Kings, it allows us to see the reason that God allowed the nation to be destroyed. As I said on last week, it allows us to see the reason behind. And I don't know about you, but I just think that sometimes it's not good enough. I don't know if you like me, but in my life, sometimes when things don't go exactly the way I anticipate them to go, or when things are not going the way I want them to go, it would be great if I could always understand. And this is what Kings does. It allows us to get the full understanding of why God destroyed the nation. And I think that's important. I think it's very important because sometimes you can be thinking it's one thing, but in actuality, it's actually something else. And so what we find about Second Kings is that the nation of Israel was supposed to be God's people, but their lifestyle didn't show it. And what God did is he began to slowly remove his hand of protection and provision. And why is that important? It's important not to those people who don't claim to be Christians. It's important to those of us who do claim to be Christians. Why is that? because it shows that God is watching your level of integrity. It shows that God is listening to what you say, but at the same time, he's watching what you do. And at the end of the day, when I see this in Kings, it shows me that their immoral lifestyle was the reason that God had allowed their enemies to beat them and force them to surrender. And poor Israel didn't connect one thing to another, so they never corrected their behavior. And I want to stress this, right? That normally when the nation of Israel would come up against enemies, and they would pray a cry out to God, that God would immediately give them victory. Normally, when there was a situation that happened or circumstances, especially with their enemies, God would give them victory. But here in the story, what we find is that their enemies had caused a famine. This is what he says, that there's going to be a famine that's going to last for 7 years. And instead of God standing up to deliver them, he allows their enemies to oppress them to the point that it brings about a famine in the land. And I want to stress the fact, right before we go into the woman of Shunem, I want to stress the fact that sometimes it's difficult for us, right, to put two and two together. Sometimes it's difficult for us to put together the things that we have going on in our lives that may not be going right, and the things that we're doing in our lives that we may not be doing right. And so when I read Kings and I read things like that God has called for a famine on the nation of Israel, it brings a question to my mind as to what the nation of Israel could have done to make God change his course of behavior towards them. But just like some of us, we don't recognize the root cause of a problem that continues to plague our lives. We don't recognize that the inner things that we have going on the inside could actually be the root cause of the problems in your life. And this is why I stress having God a part of your life, because God leads you to areas that you need to fix or that need your attention. He gives you insight into things, right? And this is what I look when I look at that God has called for a famine. It's evident that God was not pleased. And I think sometimes that we don't take into consideration that sometimes the things that we struggle with, or sometimes the things that God has allowed us to deal with, he allows us to deal with them because he is not pleased with something in our lives. And this not just for those who don't proclaim to be saved, but this is especially for those of us who go to church and say that we love God, who go to church and say that we are Christians, who profess the Christian faith, that sometimes God will allow some things to happen in your life because he's displeased with the way that you're living your life. And when I say stressing the importance of having a relationship with God, that God will sometimes show you that the connection between what you're dealing with on the outside is because of the things that you have allowed to linger on the inside. And so he begins to show you the things that you need to work on, the things that you need to fix. And I believe that sometimes if we could get it, if we could understand that the things that are happening on the outside, our outside conditions, are a reflections of our inner conditions, it would change the way we look at what we're doing and how we're living our lives. And so what God does, he says, I'm calling for a famine. And so this is what I want to point out about that God had used Elijah to bring this woman's son back to life. And now Elijah gives her insight that there will be a famine in the future. And so I want you to get this, that God is planning to punish the nation of Israel, that God is planning to bring about a famine as a punishment for Israel because they have not been living the way that God told them to live. But here's what I want you to notice. I want to point out that God is just. Notice that while God is punishing Israel, he has enough mercy to guide a woman around the punishment who didn't deserve to be punished. And I think that that's very significant. It shows us something about God that we may not have paid attention to. It's called the righteousness of God. But the way to interpret that is that God is just, that God punishes those who needs to be punished while showing mercy to those who have been merciful. And this is what the text says, that they that are merciful shall obtain mercy. And in other words, it's just saying that God won't mix up, right? If I deserve to be blessed, he won't mix up a curse with a blessing on my life. If I've been doing good, that God sees the good that I've been doing and he rewards me accordingly. And for those who haven't been doing so good, Yeah, and I like that about God. I like that God is just enough to not bring a punishment on me that I don't deserve, to not allow me to deal with things in my life that I don't deserve to deal with. And it just shows that God is just. I like the fact that God can be punishing on one side and at the same time be merciful to somebody who don't deserve it. And that's just an encouragement for those of you who are living the way that God told you to live. Don't think that God is missing you. Don't think that God has missed your blessing, right? And I want you to get that God is just. He says to Abraham, I will not destroy a city for 50 men who are righteous. And I want you to consider that. I want you to consider that by you living the right way, by you doing the right things, by you behaving in the right ways, that God may be sparing some things in your life because you living right. And so that's my encouragement. My encouragement is, if you are doing right, trust that God is just, and that those who deserve punishment will be punished, but those who deserve mercy will be mercy. And so I like this, that Elijah give her insight. Insight so that she can escape the coming judgment. That Elijah gives her insight. And why do I want to stress that? I want to stress that because so many times we put emphasis on the material blessings that God gives us, on the material things that, oh, God gonna bless you with a house, or oh, God gonna bless you with a car, or oh, God gonna send a paycheck to your house. But we overlook the fact that God gives one thing that's called insight, not just material things, but insight is something that money cannot buy, but is very important for your life. Insight into those internal things. Have you ever been living with some things going on the inside, and you didn't quite know or understand what it is that you was dealing with, but some kind of way God showed you, right, that there was something that was missing on the inside, or that there was something that was broken on the inside, that God gives you insight. And in this particular story, I like that not only do we know that God will give you insight inwardly, but he'll give you insight about the things that are about to happen in your life. Not only does God give you insight internally, but he gives insight into things that can affect your life. He warns you of the things that are up to road. He shows you that there's a struggle ahead. Have you ever been there where you talking to somebody and it's like something ain't right about this person? You start meeting this person and something just ain't right. It's that sixth sense, right? That intuition that God will give you insight into something that's about to happen so that you can move accordingly. And I like to stress that, man. I like to stress that because God is more than just material blessings. That I said on last week, that God is more than just material blessing, but the importance that you need God's insight for your life, that you need God's direction for your life, that you need God to show you when you need to go to the left and when you go to the right. And this is why I stress the importance of finding a place. When I say go to church, I'm not talking about going to church just to tell people that you went to church, but I'm talking about going to church to hear God give you insight into some things that are about to happen into your life, so you know that you probably was thinking about going left, but now you know to go right. That you know that you probably was thinking about doing it one way, but because you heard from God, that God was able to direct you in the twists and turns of your life. And this is why I stress, man, about being a Christian. It's not just about going to church, but I want you to understand that God has a way of showing you when to go to the left, when to go to the right, telling you the right time to do certain things. And I want to stress this to you tonight, because some of you have been living your life saying that you're a Christian, but living without God's insight. And you have got to put yourself in a place where you can hear God, because there are some things. Now, imagine, has she not, and this is what I love about this also. I love the fact that God has a way of returning the good that you put out, right? And I don't want to move too fast on that, but because this woman was kind to Elisha, she didn't realize that God was going to do something for her that she probably would not have been able to get had it not been for Elijah. And I want to stress that, right? That you have got to connect yourself with somebody. If you can't hear God, connect yourself to somebody. And this is the importance of having a good Bible believing, godly, spiritual church. And I'm not talking about just running around shouting, but I'm talking about people who can hear from God and give you some direction for your life. How many times have you went to the left, right, not recognizing that you probably should have did it a different way until you did it that wrong way and discovered like, man, I must have missed it. You missed God's direction for your life. All right. And so with that, I'm moving. At the same time, this woman comes up in conversation of the king. She walks in. And I like stories like this because it indirectly shows you how God's favor works in your life, how God's favor works in your life. That the king and the man of God, that the servant of the man of God is having a conversation about the things about the prophet. And in talking about the prophet, they bring up the woman, the miracle, who, and this is in the story that's after the story we walked over last week, but I don't want to go too far into that. But Elijah raises her son. He gives her a miracle. Not only does he give her a son, but her son fell sick and then he died, and Elijah brought him back to life. The king is asking about the woman or a miracle that Elijah did. The woman comes up in conversation, and as they're talking, the woman walks in. Don't God know? Look, I want you to say this to yourself. Say, God knows when. Say it again. Say, God knows when. God knows exactly. I believe it's an illustration of how God's favor works. That God knows exactly when to bring the right things into your life, when to bring the right circumstances into your life, when to bring the right opportunities into your life, when to bring the right people in your life. Only God can bring the right things to the right people and create the right circumstances at the right time. And I want to stress to you tonight the importance of having a relationship with God, because what God will do, and this is one of the scriptures in the Bible, it says that the steps of a good man are ordered by the Lord. And I want to stress that it shows how God orchestrates the events of your life to a T for those who choose to walk in his ways. Check out that these people are having a conversation about a woman, right? She don't know that they're having a conversation, but God does. She don't know that they're talking about her, but God does. And God sends her in. Catch this. She's coming back because she has a need. God sends her to the right people at the right time while they having a conversation, and she ends up being able to be to get her blessing. And I want you to hear me when I say this as I'm going to a close. It's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that things come together the way that they come together. And if you're on the path that God has you to be on, I want to encourage you tonight to stay on that path, because God knows when. I want you to say that to yourself, that God knows when. God knows when to bless you. God knows when to send you through some things. God knows when to pull you out. God knows when to put you in. I want you to hear me when I say this. Just like the people, the bakers who bake cakes, just like the people who cook, you got to know this specific time, not just to put it in, but when to take it out. That God knows when to get you, put you in, and he knows when to, how long to leave you in there. He knows how long that you can deal with it, how long you can tolerate, what is going to bring out of you and what is going to put in you. That God knows when to do whatever it is that he's going to do. And I want to encourage you tonight to stay patient, but stay faithful, because God knows when. It shows God's provision for those who choose to walk in his ways and live according to his moral laws. And I want you to get this tonight, that the same generosity that she showed to Elijah, God in turn makes the king show it to her. Did you catch that? That at the beginning of the story last week, when we talked about the woman, we talked about her kindness and how she was just a blessing to Elijah for no good reason, just out of the kindness of her heart, because she wanted to do something nice for the man of God. And now we see years later, get this, years later, what good that she put out to Elijah now comes back from the king. Notice that God in turn makes the king show the kindness to her that she had once showed to Elijah. And here's my favorite scripture. Be not weary in well doing, for in due season you will reap if you faint not. Keep giving. Whatever measure you use in giving it, recognize that it will be measured back to you when it is given back to you. And it, look at this, it took 7+ years for her to see what she had put out there. But in reality, guess what? In the end, she got it back. And I want you to hear me when I say this tonight, because I'm about to go offline. But I want you to hear me. The same same way you give it is the same way you will get it back. And that goes for the same way you give it is the same way you'll get it back. And if you haven't seen the good that you have done, keep on being faithful. If you haven't seen the love that you put out being given back to you, keep on being loving. If you haven't seen it come back yet, keep doing it, because I guarantee you it's coming back. Hear me when I say that it took 7 years. And get this, that it didn't come from the same place that she put it out. It didn't come from Elijah, but it came from somebody else. And I want you to hear me, that don't expect people. Sometimes people won't treat you the same way that you treat them. Sometimes they won't talk to you the same way that you talk to them. But I want you to hear me when I say this, that when it's your time to be blessed, that God will remember the good that you did, that God will remember the love that you showed, that God will remember the mercy that you showed. Hear me when I say this, that the same way you give it, it will be given back to you. And so I love this story. I couldn't go deep tonight, but I just wanted to give you some things that for you to think about when it comes to your relationship with God, that God is watching what you do, and he'll bless you according to the way you are a blessing to other people. And so with that, guys, that's all I have. I do encourage you to go visit our website, www.thegodmovement.com. I am working out some kinks with our website, but I still encourage you, go to it, see the things that are on there, connect with our ministry. We do have our Sunday morning service. We moved our service to the New Bethel Baptist Church, 7402 Tier Wester, Houston, Texas 77021. And we have our service at 8:30 on Sunday morning. So, guys, with that, it's great to see you guys tonight. Hopefully, next week you can tune in. I come on every Wednesday night at 8:30. So, you guys have a great night, and you guys be blessed. I am going offline.